Welcome to Golden Reflections, the podcast delving into the captivating 50-year journey of Northeast Ohio Medical University. I'm your host, Lindsay Loftus, and I'm excited to lead you through a series of heartfelt and nostalgic conversations with pivotal figures in NEOMED's history. We had the honor and pleasure of sitting down with two foundational figures from NEOMED's past. First, Dr. Robert Blacklow, and later, you'll hear audio from Dr. Robert Liebelt from an interview that occurred just weeks before he passed away on December 16th, 2023, at the age of 96. Here's our interview with past president, Dr. Blacklow.
My name's Robert Blacklow. I was president of NEOUCOM, now NEOMED, from 1992 to 2002. My background was that of a vagabond wanderer. I was at Harvard for quite some time, where I dealt with educational development, bringing underserved into the medical and healthcare sphere. Then I went to now Rush University, where I was the dean and vice president for health affairs for a number of years. And then I moved to Jefferson Medical College, now Thomas Jefferson University, where I was there for 7 or 8 years. Then I had this unique opportunity to come to NEOUCOM, where I could be president and at that time and dean as well, and I could shape and mold and see how my thoughts and ideas about where medicine and medical education were going in a very unique setting.
Discuss the significance of revisiting our story 5 decades later, and what does NEOUCOM, now NEOMED, mean to you?
Past is prologue. I think if you look at where NEOMED has been and come, you would have the feeling that this change and growth was inevitable. It really was. Now, I'm lucky. I'm the only person probably on the faculty and perhaps on the staff who had the pleasure of knowing all 5 leaders. Stanley Olson, who really put the bricks and mortar together to start it. Stanley Olson was a very smart man who understood the art of compromise. I think he understood it better than I did, quite frankly. Then there was Bob Liebelt. Bob Liebelt was the recruiter. Bob Liebelt had a wonderful personality. He could remember names. He could remember people and facts, and he was responsible for recruiting from all over Northeast Ohio people who were venturesome enough to come to teach at a new medical school. Then there was Colin Campbell, who had to take all of this and mold it, bring it together, bring students and faculty, etc., together. My role, well, I'll give you my opinion, but I'm sure there are people that have other opinions too. My role, I think, at the time was to establish a firm academic background, insist on quality, insist that faculty who we were going to be recruiting, because the first faculty had been there 20 years, so it was that they were getting older, and to get a second group of faculty. We also expanded in that we developed a regional program, which was the public health program. And we also began the recruitment of minorities. It was interesting. When I came there was a board of trustees, some of who were appointed and some of whom were presidents of the 3 universities who fought very hard to get the school. But Stanley Olson understood if they got work together, he could have a school. And the issue was how to develop a regional program. And we did it with the public health program. We did it in other ways, but and minorities, there was a board of 9. We had a 430 student body. 2 of the independent trustees were African-American physicians. And they said to me, we have a class of 400 and something. We have only 4 or 5 minorities. What are you going to do about it? And how are you going to do it? And I said, well, first of all, you have to want to do it. And then by the time I left, there were 10 or 12% who were of color. Then after me came Lois Nora. Lois knew that I was already struggling under the constraints, and she recognized and convinced the powers in Columbus that NEOUCOM would wither on the vine if it wasn't allowed to determine its own destiny. And that's what we really owe to Lois. Then Dr. Gershon. I knew Dr. Gershon when I heard he was appointed. I had met him through various organizations. I knew he was a builder, fundamentally, because he was the person at the University of Colorado who moved the campus from Denver to the Fitzsimmons Army base, which was being closed. And I knew that this man was a builder, and indeed he was. With the independent status, you could issue bonds, you could do all the things that you couldn't do under the constraints. And I visited twice during his tenure. And indeed, the campus was growing and growing, and I think it's wonderful. He also started the pharmacy program, which was another indication that we were becoming a health sciences university, not just a medical and graduate school. And then there's Dr. Langell. I have had the opportunity and the honor to speak with him 2 or 3 times, and he is someone who understands the need to make it a full health sciences university, hence the dental school and the generosity of the Batanti family. But each of the leaders has seen a role, and this progress, I think, was inevitable if you look at it historically. So that's why I think revisiting the story after 50 years shows you 50 years that you could have probably predicted if you'd had a crystal ball when it was first started.
Can you reflect on the university's shining moments and its impact on health professions education?
Several things come to mind. The first, and it's not a moment, it's a growth into a moment. I'm going to talk about a trend. Yes, one of the shining moments, as you know, I returned to Harvard to teach health policy and write about diversity in medicine. One of the most shining moments I had was when I had an orthopedic problem, and my orthopod doctor knew I had been at NEOMED. He said, you know, we have a faculty member in our orthopedic department who went to NEOUCOM. And that was a real shining moment. You know, you can do anything, you can go any place from a place like this. Another shining moment for me personally was for our 25th anniversary. That was the silver, this is the gold. The staff and I, and by the way, I have to tell you, I was blessed with what I'll call cabinet of 5 or 6 wonderful people who stuck it through with me, and we did things that people didn't think we could do. And I'll mention their names, but the shining moment was that someone, I think it was Sue Dreitzler, knew I was involved in music and stuff like that. She said, what do you think? Oh, and I was on the board of the Akron Symphony. She said, what do you think about bringing the Akron Symphony out to NEOUCOM on a summer afternoon to help celebrate the 25th anniversary? And we did, and we invited the community, and it was mobbed. My shining moment is that I got a chance to conduct it. I had conducted Boston Pops before, and so I had some experience, but I had a great personal time. So that's, if you'll pardon me, a shining moment. I guess we call it a very personal shining moment. Another shining moment was when we were able to get federal funds to build what is now the Wasson Center. I think it's still there. It's a simulated patient center. It's still there. All right.
Yes.
And the regular conference room. The presidents of the Ohio universities used to meet monthly in Columbus. The 10-pound gorilla in the room was obviously the Ohio State University. Gordon Gee was the president there, as he's been 3 times now. But he found out that we had gotten federal money. It was $6-8 million through an appropriations bill to build a center, and the feds were funding 90% of it. And he came over, he said, Bob, he was direct. He said, how did a little school like yours get all that money? And I said, well, Ralph Regular, who was known as a cardinal, the cardinals were the chairman of the appropriations subcommittees. This was on health education. And the Pope was the chairman of the appropriation committees sub-chairman. And I said, well, Ralph Regular was in on the construction of the school, and we went down to Washington and talked to him. He said, well, we've sent people down, but we haven't ever gotten that kind of money. I said, Gordon, I went down and I went personally to ask for it. I think Gordon Gee learned a little lesson, but that was a shining moment. The smallest institution in the group at that point got a big chunk of money. Another shining moment, I think, is the decision to cooperate with Cleveland State. I think it was wonderful. Cleveland State was sort of an orphan in Cleveland. It was the place you went to if you couldn't get into Case, you couldn't get into Ohio State. And Cleveland State was a gold mine for us, for people who wanted to go into the health profession. Now, this happened after I left, but I would never have been able to do something like that if it wasn't for an independent institution, which we thank Lois Nora for. But the point is, that's another shining moment. That's beginning to think outside the box. And I think that's what NEOMED's been doing. It's been thinking outside the box. Who would think that you'd have a pharmacy within the institution, that there's a health center? And all of these things are all shining moments, and they have to do with not just who is running it, but the team that put it together. Am I allowed to mention names?
Certainly.
All right. I wrote the names down. There was Glenn Saltzman, who was the director of science when I got there. There was Rich Lewis, God bless him, who was the legislative liaison to the state. You couldn't have a lobbyist because you couldn't lobby against yourself. You were a state institution. So we called them legislative liaison. And he introduced me to everybody in the state. He asked me when I first came, what's your politics? Are you Republican or Democrat? I said, I'm an independent. I said, why? He said, because when you are a state institution, you want to work with those who are in power. So if there's a Republican, you work with them. A Democrat, you don't develop hard feeling. And that was a good lesson to learn, because this was the first state non-private institution I had been at. It was a nice lesson to learn. There was Barbara Sawinski. She was my administrative assistant and pointed me in the right direction many times. I might have been in the wrong direction, going in the wrong direction. There was Rick Epley, who was able somehow to take a very meager budget and meet the needs we had. There was Sue Dreitzler, who did the development, and she was wonderful. She knew people, and she developed the way we wanted to present ourselves. There was Gary Schneider, who took over for Glenn Saltzman, and he began to put science as a priority when we looked at new recruits, not only teaching, but science. And last but not least was my right-hand person, John Engel. John Engel was an educator par excellence. It's John who urged us to develop and go after the clinical center. As a matter of fact, After it was built, we had people from Indiana University Medical School look at it. We had people from Harvard look at it. We had people from the other schools in Ohio. And in fact, some of them sent their students to us to have their clinical assessments done. So rather than shining, I'd use the word impact moments. Oh, one last, hospitals. Medical schools need hospitals. Medical schools who own hospitals, which they didn't, medical school who didn't own their own hospitals, some of them wish they did. But anyways, NEOMED came into a situation, plunk in the middle of the Joneses cornfield, and we had hospitals in Akron, Canton, and Youngstown. Those hospitals in their own institution, own towns, were terrible competitive. In fact, at some points, directors of the hospitals were not on speaking terms, all except Akron Children's. Akron Children's was unique. It had leadership for years with Bill Considine, who recognized the impact that being affiliated with a medical school would have on Akron Children's. And I believe at this point that Akron Children's is still ranked higher than Rainbow Babies. People say, how did it happen? It happened because of leadership that Bill had and the way that all of us who had leadership roles worked to make it happen. But we were the one place where the hospitals had to encounter each other. It was the medical school. And the students, did they want to go to Akron General, which doesn't exist anymore? Did they want to go to Summer, which really doesn't exist anymore? Did they want to go to Altman or St. Joseph's, I think it was, in Canton? Or did they want to go to the two hospitals in Youngstown? And we provided them with medical students who are both the health and the burden, but we also began to provide them with a steady stream of interns, residents, and staff. For example, Joe Zarconi, I just put him up because everybody knows him. Joe Zarconi, wonderful person, just got a much deserved award. But the point is that we were the place that brought the hospitals together. If it weren't for us, there wouldn't have been the collaboration, and it was toward medical education. And all of a sudden, the faculty found themselves questioned about decisions. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And not by their peers, but by the students and residents. And this helped keep them on their toes too. So I think that's a shining moment, what we did for the hospitals and hence the healthcare in Northeast Ohio. Finally, I guess I have to mention Bill Keck. Unique man, unique ideals, unique way to work with others. And it was a great pleasure to have this Northeast Ohio Master in Public Health program, which he wanted greatly. And we worked hard to get it. In the long run, one of the universities wanted to block it. Thank goodness one of the trustees persuaded them not to. And this was a boon for us too. We were unique. We had the Academic Health Center, and Bill Keck and I and Jim Boex, oh, by the way, I forgot Jim too, wrote several papers on the role of the Academic Health Center.
I know you shared a cherished memory of conducting the Akron Symphony for the 25th or the silver anniversary, but are there any other notable moments or milestones that stand out for you?
Is the Hippocratic Amphitheater still there? And is the Herb Garden still there?
The Herb Garden is no longer there, but the Hippocrates Amphitheater still remains.
Okay, good. Well, I'll tell these were just interesting stories. Harry Michel, who was from Youngstown, was one of the two legislators in the Ohio legislature. He and Ralph Regular pushed the bill through in 1973 to establish NEOUCOM at that time. Anyways, Harry Michel was a proud member of the Greek community in Youngstown. We wanted to honor him. Rich Lewis really felt that we should honor him in some way. Well, of course, there's the Michel Amphitheater, but also the proud tradition of Hippocrates. Rich Lewis talked with Harry Michel and said, you know, if we're going to celebrate the Greek tradition of Hippocrates, why can't we have an outdoor amphitheater built like a Greek amphitheater with the plane tree behind it, where students can sit and we can convene when it's nice outside? And so Harry said, well, how are we going to do that? And we said, well, we'd like you to get the Greek community to help pay for it. And we had estimates of what it would cost. And so we had a party at NEOMED, and we invited the guests that Harry felt we should invite. And they all came, and we were prepared to make a strong pitch for funds for this. No sooner do we start to make the pitch, but people reach in their pockets, have wads of money, just passed it to us. And by the end of that evening, I think we had 2/3 of the money. Harry said, this is the way we work, and we help our friends. Now, my wife is a botanist and a plant biologist. And when we moved to Ohio, it's a great place for plants. And we had been to England. I spent 3.5 years in England. 2 of our children were born in England. And we always used to remember going to the Chelsea Herb Garden in London and the Botanical Garden in Oxford. And I said to Winnie, my wife, I said, is there any way that the Portage County Herb Society can help with this? And Winnie said, well, we can help design the garden. We can put it, and we'll have a place for European botanicals, ancient botanicals, early American, et cetera, et cetera. And how are we going to get the money? And Winnie said, we'll see. One day, Helen Dix, the Dix family, the newspapers, the Record Courier, Helen Dix, who was a friend of my wife's and very active in the Botanic Garden as well, came in to NEOUCOM, walked into to Barbara Sawinski, said, I'd like to see Dr. Blacklow. And she said, here's a check. This will pay for the herb garden. And it was a check of almost 6 figures. So we could do what we wanted. I'm sorry that the herb garden isn't there, but in the fall every year, we used to cut the basil and cut the plants and let the students and the staff and the faculty take them home. We had digitalis, that's foxglove. We had chamomile, we had all these. And this gave some credence to the idea of plants originally, historically, were the biologicals of times past. That's another story.
Yeah, I think what's salient is that Congressman Regula, Senator Michelle, Helen Dix, and her family all felt like NEOUCOM, now NEOMED, was their university too, and part of the community, and went out of their way to support us. And
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. And there's one more family I'd like to recognize because he helped us a great deal. When we moved and we lived in Sugarbush Knolls, which was a little village, good for us, a township or village, there was no local income tax. So there were 200 families. It was started by the Porthouse family, who founded Davy Tree. And our next door neighbors were Vicky and Gerald Reed. Now there's the Reed Long Distance Learning Center. Gerald Reed was an emeritus professor of education at Kent State, who had done the first interchange educational with Russia years before we got there. He was a wonderful man, and he was interested in the idea that we could do long distance education between the main campus and a hospital. And we used to talk about it. We used to sit in the porch and drink some spirits occasionally. And he said, I'll see what I can do about it. One day he came over and he said, Bob, here's a check for $500,000. You don't always have to ask for money. It seems to come if you give something that people want to support.
Well, the Reed Distance Education Center still exists. It's still used, highly used, and it was the predecessor to what we know as some of the lecture capture and the electronic dissemination of information on campus and between organizations. So you certainly were a trendsetter with your work with the Reed family. And I know their great nephew, Roger Reed, well. And
yes.
Yeah, and we've connected Roger and Sally to NEOMED. So you should feel good about the Reed Distance Education Center on campus.
I talked in the beginning about the past is prologue. I think that the evolution and the needs for the evolution of NEOMED were also evident to the state. Earlier in my tenure, there was the group of university presidents who advised the Ohio Board of Regents. Like I said, we called it the Ohio State Board of Regents because this was their favorite place to put state money. Eventually, one of the governors, I think it was Strickland, after I left, realized that the way to get education coordinated in the state was to have an education commissioner or whatever the name was, and to downplay the influence of the Board of Regents. And he did that. And at the time, I think Lois Nora was the president. And he recognized that the whole educational scene in Northeast Ohio needed a review. And there was a review. And what it said fundamentally, that the only way to strengthen healthcare access and healthcare quality in Northeast Ohio was to allow NEOMED to exist as freestanding. And this is what really was the impetus. And Lois was facile enough to understand that this was the way to do it. When I was there, there were rumblings. I had two board members who were independent board members who said to me, Bob, is there any way we can do something? And I said, not right now. It's not going to work. The idea to put the school on sound educational footing was the way to do it. Then it needed to be on sound financial footing. And that's when President Gershon and President Langell came. Burnham in Chicago said, make no small plans when he redid the Chicago oceanfront. I think that Gershon and Langell have made no small plans. We made the biggest plans we could, given the constraints, and the job isn't finished yet, obviously.
We talked a lot about the evolution of the university and cherished memories and some other things that have happened in the university's past. Are there any other distinctive traditions or events that made your connection to NEO-UCOM, NEOMED special?
Yeah, I think so. One of the traditions that I learned there, now I don't know if it still exists, but on match day, every student put $1 in a kitty. Does it still exist?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this started before I was there, but this was a tradition I thought was wonderful. You put $1 in a kitty, and everybody pulled a name out of a hat that they were the person who got their envelope. But the last person to get the envelope got the kitty as well. And, it came out to be, $105, $110 now. Now the kitty's probably bigger. Another tradition, using graduation as a vehicle to spread the word about NEO-UCOM and NEOMED. And my team and I will take credit for this. And I got pushback for the first year, but not since. I felt that the students needed an awards day, a day where they would award and celebrate themselves, and the parents could come and see them. And that to move from venue to venue every year didn't display the school as well as it could. And so we started the tradition of having it in Akron. That was the one place that could fit everybody. You didn't have to say, I can only have 2 seats, extra seats for my family. You could have as many as you want. It's a big auditorium. It's a big concert hall. And so the day before we had the awards, but the next day we used as a focus on the commencement. That means it's the commencement of your career. I made a point of inviting internationally known people and local people. We had the lady who worked at the NIH who found that thalidomide caused limb atrophy in the newborns. We had the doctor who found that DES, to preserve the placenta and the baby, could cause infertility. This was unintended consequences of medicine. That was the message. We had a person named Rosemary Stevens, who was an expert on the American hospital and its relationship to healthcare. And we gave her an honorary degree, and she talked about this. We had 2 brothers, Frank and Gerald Austin, who grew up in Akron. Their father was brought over from Germany to develop the Akron blimp. These people lived their dream. We had husband and wife, doctor, same class. He was one of the victims of the Unabomber, but he survived. When his wife told that story, the audience dead silence, like in the middle of an eclipse. Ed Pellegrino, who was a medical ethicist and talked about the morals in healthcare, got an honorary degree about that too. So I tried, and it is now, I think, a tradition to give up honorary degrees, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, in my last year, we had David Satcher, who was president of Morehouse Medical School, and then he went to become the United States Surgeon General. And he talked about equity in healthcare. So tried to make the commencement day. I think that tradition now lives, and I think it made the students feel special.
Dr. Blacklow, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share some of these memories with us. I know there are many, many more, but you and Winnie have been great ambassadors for NEOMED, NEO-UCOM. And I want to give you an opportunity to share a final thought with our audience today. What would you like to leave with our audience relative to your time at the university?
As you look at it over 50 years, everybody in leadership roles has things that they do specially. And if they do them reasonably well, then they're a good fit. If you please everybody, you're probably not doing the job. If you don't please anybody, you're certainly not doing your job. I was blessed with a wonderful team, hospitals that were beginning to relish their role as teaching hospitals. The student body began to have pride in itself. That's very important. Very important for a student body to have pride in itself. The faculty was growing and prospered. The community, the legislators whom I met in Washington, they were good people and they listened. And finally, I'd like to thank the presidents of the 3 universities. There were 5 of them while I was there. I'd like to thank them for sticking with them when they knew their time was ending. I think everybody felt that it was inevitable, but they allowed us to do things as a small institution on a small scale that we couldn't have done at that point in time without their support.
It's a privilege and an honor to get a chance to speak with you this way. And your contribution to this podcast is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, David.
Nice
to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you. And thanks.
Our regards to Winnie, and we will be in touch.
Oh, maybe I can get her just to say hi.
Go get her.
Here she comes.
Okay.
This is
Hello.
Winnie.
Hey, Winnie.
Hi there.
Hi.
This is David Vidito, our alumni director.
Hi, David.
Hi there. Very nice to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to be seen, as we say,
That's
at
right.
our age. Yes. And not
He
viewed.
did a great job. He did a wonderful
Did he?
job. Yes.
Did he?
And you know what I did at the end?
What did you do at the end?
I thanked the presidents for their support during the time I was there, because it was necessary at that time to keep the schools going.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a wonderful time and a wonderful place, and it was perfect for us. Hopefully, it was good for the university. And we loved the people. They worked so hard. They were so devoted. And it was just a wonderful place. I'm sure it is today, and it's grown and become powerful, I think. Anyway,
Yes.
how nice of you to talk to Bob. He had a wonderful time reliving that time. It's like being there again. It was really special. So thank you. Well, I'll let you guys go.
Good seeing you, Winnie.
Okay.
Good to see you too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank
All
you
right,
too.
Thank you
Dr.
again.
Blacklow, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
David, thank you too.
Thank you again. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a sweet man.
Oh, yeah.
Really sweet man. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly, those two are in love. Did you
Mhm.
see how they're holding on to one another?
How great. Yeah.
That's so nice.
Bob Liebelt had a reputation of going around a room and introducing everybody by name. That was his reputation. Did you know that?
I did.
So I said, damn it, I'm going to try and do that.
It's an art.
It's an art. I didn't have the skill, interpersonal charm that Bob had, but he was wonderful. He was wonderful.
Dr. Robert Liebelt was the founding dean of the College of Medicine, a combat air crewman in World War II, renowned expert and leader in addiction medicine and recovery, beloved member of the Akron community, and the university's original construction manager. We're grateful to have captured this audio just weeks before his passing. Special thanks goes out to our former marketing colleague, Rod Ingram, for conducting the interview. Without further ado, here are a few excerpts from the final sit-down interview with Dr. Robert Liebelt.
One Sunday morning, I'll never forget this part. One Sunday morning, Dr. Olson, this was down in Houston, and he wanted to talk to me. So we started talking, and he said, I'd like you to be the dean. I said, oh, wait a minute, Dr. Olson. and I said, okay. And so that's when I became the dean of NEOMED.
You're often mentioned as one of the founding sort of fathers, if you will, of NEOMED. When you hear 50 years later that it's still going strong, how does that make you feel?
I feel like I almost can't believe it that this happened.
If you could speak to students now, 50 years later from when it all started, what would you say to students?
I would say that being a physician is the greatest thing I feel assistance-wise to the public. I'm here to help you.
So many have supported NEOMED,
Mm-hmm.
and you've met many of them. What would you say to those who have supported NEOMED?
Thank you to all the people who supported NEOMED. It was great. It was great. And you're bringing back memories here that I haven't thought of in many years now.